Welcome back to the show, Total Financial Solutions, Safer Money Hour. I'm Arif Halaby. Go and go to hometownstation.com, click on Total Financial Solutions. If you ever have a question, we'll be happy to address it. Send us your comments, and we can work through that. Occasionally, we will be able to answer your question even right here on the air. All right, I want to continue with special guest Carlos Solano, author of a book, BS Behind the Badge. An interesting read. If you are in law enforcement, if you have a relative that's in law enforcement, and you've been at a barbecue, or you're talking to friends, or you're married to a law enforcement officer, you know that occasionally a story will come up. Well, gosh, let me tell you about what happened last week. Or something funny might happen. They say, well, a few years ago, this is what happened. Everybody has a story. And I used to say, I worked in police recruitment for a little while, and I would speak in front of large groups of potential candidates. And I would say 5 years on the police department would give you a lifetime of stories, because you would be able to have almost a story about everything. Sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're very sad, sometimes they're life-changing. And in each of these instances, there isn't anybody else that you would call. You know, Carlos, at one point in law enforcement, I remember the Water and Power, DWP, was striking. I don't know if you remember that, probably 91 or 2 or 3, something like that. And they were on strike. We want more money. Their pension is unbelievable. Unbelievable. It's probably one of the best in the nation. Maybe the Tennessee Valley Authority, which is the TVA out of Tennessee, of course, water and power. Maybe they're better. But other than that, it's an amazing. Railroads probably are at the top as well. Now, I remember they were striking for more money per hour, and we were making $32,000 a year, and the average person was making a heck of a lot more. And we said, gosh, this is a tough job. And yet we had to go and make sure that we protected them, because there were DWP folks wanting to go to work, and some of the folks were preventing them by standing in front and throwing signs, and not gang signs, but actual signs.
So
throwing
those?
signs, man. Throwing signs and messing up the cars and the vehicles. So we thought, wait a second, we're protecting these people that are already going to be millionaires when they retire, and some of us have to work 2 jobs. I remember there were times when I had to work 3 jobs. Overtime, man, if there was overtime, I took it. If there was a 12 or 15-hour shifts, didn't matter to me. If I slept in the cot room, we called it the cot room, because I had court in the morning, worked till 3 in the morning, back up at 5:36, 7 o'clock in the morning, whatever you had to do. But today it's a little different. In law enforcement, folks are getting paid a lot better. And there's been a lot of conversation about the pensions. Now, if you have a high school diploma, even a GED, because I think LAPD still hires at a GED, high school diploma, GED, with 5, maybe 7 years on the job, that's $120,000 a year with a little bit of overtime. And I'm not talking promotion up to the ranks of whatever. It's an amazing pension. That's a $5,000 or $6,000 a month pension when you reach age 50 or 55 or 57. So we see that. We used to have amazing medical. I remember they covered LASIK surgery. And you'd go to these folks that would advertise in our newspaper, and you'd walk in there, and my eyes started, needing glasses, and so I went in there a couple years after I was wearing glasses, and it looked like roll call. You walk in there, and there's, hey, Jim, hey, Susie, hey, where you guys working now? Oh, my gosh. And you're sitting in that room, because it's all law enforcement getting these $1,500 or $2,000 surgeries. We had amazing benefits. Now, let me share with you something. You've heard of the recession. That affected not just you and your job, but it affected law enforcement and certainly some of their pensions. And believe it or not, many of them lost money just like all of you. And yet we're asking them to be and to do things that you would never do for about the same kind of money that you're making. I remember this famous movie star lady and 2 of my partners, and we were called to the house as well. And it was in the middle of the night. It was a cold night, West LA, and big house, doors that gates, and she was afraid. Somebody's in my backyard. It was a windy night. Law enforcement guys check the backyard, come back, ma'am, there's no footprints in the mud. There's nothing going on. I don't see anything. It must be, must be the wind. Sorry, you got to go back. You got to go back. They checked again. And they came back. And she said, no, you don't know who I am? Yes, ma'am, we know who you are. We know you're Goldie Hawn. And she wouldn't allow the officers to leave. I said, ma'am, do you not understand what kidnapping is? Eventually she left. Now, before they even got in their car and drove halfway down the street, the phone rang, I'm sure at the police station, because they got a call that said, come to the office, come back to the station. and explain to you why you didn't check the backyard. Well, of course they did, and ultimately she gave an apology, and all was good. We understand. People are scared sometimes. But you notice she didn't call the cable company.
Right.
She didn't call Department of Water and Power.
Right.
She never phoned her congressman or her state senator or anybody. She called the local police. Folks, these are the people that when your life is on the line or your fanny's in trouble, you're not going to ask for anybody except them. Whether you like them or you don't, they're the only ones that are going to stand in front of a bullet for you. Just the way it is. Carlos, tell me about some of the stories with life expectancy as you know it with law enforcement.
Studies have shown the average American peace officer, I won't speak the international, that's a whole other event, but live about 10 to 15 years less than the average American male. So you're already looking at a shorter livelihood by virtue of this job. If anyone was to pick up the job description for a police officer, you would think, okay, maybe we're paying these men and women a pretty decent pension, but no, their job says expect to be shot at, spit at, have a bottle thrown at you, get exposed to chemical environments that you can only imagine in a Hollywood scenario. You also, as cops, don't have the right to strike. And I agree, because as a public servant, it's not our job to strike to get more money. We're expected to keep the peace, maintain that calm. It's also expected that our governments would take care of that function of law enforcement or policing America. So there definitely are some huge trade-offs, personal liberties, personal health, that pension of that salary, maybe that officer will collect pretty much maybe 90% of what they make throughout their lifetime. But that's if they, get to the finish line. Anecdotally, I can speak, and I'm sure you gentlemen can too, the retirements I go to are rare. Not everyone finishes this job by year 10 or 15. There's unfortunate health issues that'll arise, or career derailments, or just a bad call made with the right intentions, but that costs that individual officer their job. So they don't really finish. You don't see a whole lot of men and women crossing that finish line after 30 years.
It's very rare. Listen, I was in a car accident driving 32 miles an hour, minding my own business, if you will, driving the police car. In 1994, somebody decides to blow a stop sign, crashes into my police car. That was that old Firebird or Trans Am, the one with the Firebird on the front,
That would be the Trans Am. Very good.
Made of solid steel. I don't know if you knew that. And the side of a police car is not made of solid steel, at least not the way that was. Multiple surgeries, back surgeries, knee surgeries. Life was not good for a very long time. In fact, I was in a walker for a while. Life was very horrible. And yet we ask those same people, listen, I did the job, I would do it again. If you told me this is the beginning of the story, the end is going to be the exact same way. The amount of lives that I could impact, the things that I could do, and ultimately being, I think, one of the top financial people around is a good thing for me. I'm okay with all that. But you also have to realize, guys, that if I remember right, and I was part of personnel for a little while, we did studies, and it was the normal life expectancy at a 20-year service was normal. Whatever a normal person does, if you will, you kind of fit in the averages. If you did 25 years of service, it was 11 years, the life expectancy.
It drops, yes.
If you did 30 years of service, it was somewhere around 18 months. Now, that's the average, meaning some are sooner or lower. So I thought, that can't be the case. So I look at the newspaper when they give the end of watch, the folks passing away, and it's right about there. People that I worked with, oh my gosh, today many of them passed away. So financially speaking, Carlos, your book certainly addresses some of the financial stuff that you might see, but the gist behind it. Tell me, I think the audience is relatives, somebody who's been in law enforcement, to understand their relatives a little bit more. But tell me what your thoughts are.
I believe it does have to be looked at. I mean, correct. No one should become a millionaire in retirement. However, I think there has to be a consideration for the risks, the life expectancy, the lack of a life expectancy that occurs in this line of work that's unique to no other line of work that I know of. And I mentioned it in my book where, sure, I could have stood in the line of a businessman, made a lot more, done a VP corporate kind of job. Sure, those are great, and you make monies really well early on, but that really what it isn't about for us. And I put the three of us in that position. We know people that it is a calling. We're not doing this to have that wealthy home in Bel Air. However, if society says, hey, you broke your back for us, you put yourself in front of that car, in front of that bullet, we'll make sure at least there's a paycheck, you can cover the rent, maybe some expenses. So somewhere in between, I'll have to let the math and the financial experts like yourself decide what is society willing to bear and willing to say that would be fair as far as compensation.
And, I think part of the mistakes that we hear, and it really truly talks about the heart of whether it be the mayor of New York or the president of the United States, when they said, I think not just, I don't know if it's racist, but certainly bigoted statements against law enforcement. And you say, but what if I was to say that about a particular race of people? Do you understand, folks? If you get in a fight with your wife or you drive home drunk, both are bad things. You try not to do those things. Whatever happens, you go to court, you might pay $10,000 or more in fines, whatever it is. In law enforcement, you lose your career, which means you could lose your home, your car, your children's college. So whereas you can make a mistake, still bad, of course, and not lose your career and everything that goes with it, in law enforcement, you don't really have a choice. You could lose everything very quickly.
And there's no Fifth Amendment right, as officers do get accused of all sorts of things, and I have throughout my 30 years and have been sued and been accused of just unspeakable events. However, I was exonerated. But during that process, basically you're ordered to tell the truth. You're ordered to speak to your supervisor. You can't hide behind a clause where I don't want to talk because I have an attorney. You can't, otherwise you're fired for insubordination.
That's right.
So again, I think law enforcement professionals give up certain things, but maybe on the back end, if you can finish the race, at least you're taken care of to a point where you can live comfortably and get to that sunset.
The book was written for what reason? Tell me, when you were writing this, what did that person look like that you thought was going to be the audience?
Basically, I was thinking of two people. The person who's not a cop, the parent who's out there just is going to come in contact with police, maybe by virtue of having to call them one day or seeing their child or someone they know abusing drugs. I was a narcotic agent for 25 years, and the drug scourge is the cancer of our society. I wanted to educate them. I know this group gets it here at this table, but still sometimes our cops need to be reminded too, they're actually doing a good job and they do need to be supported. So those are the two folks that really need to understand what this business is about.
You have some serious stories in here, and these are all firsthand? These are things that you dealt with?
Yes, personally, from my experience and speaking to my partners throughout the years.
Yeah. Well, folks, if you remember right, some of you might, if you're old enough, the old Hollywood burglary scam, arrests, the things that some of these guys were doing. And it was officers, LAPD officers, were accused and ultimately convicted, and I don't know if they confessed, but certainly there was enough evidence and they were convicted of stealing. Back in those days, and I believe even today, law enforcement polices itself. Now, if it's a good organization, it's a great thing. If it's a Miami or a Houston or a New Orleans, where back in the day, and maybe even still today, some of the corruption was so deep, you were stuck with not even trusting your own partner to not steal from you. It was really horrible. But when LAPD had its problems, or when Southern California agencies had its problems, it went in there and it dealt with them and pulled them out, and it didn't allow it to get systemic. I think when we return to that, and I think we're there, or pretty darn close to it, you're going to see that change again, where law enforcement has the trust of the community that it polices. And it's difficult. And this book, I think, will shed some light on some of those firsthand stories. Jeff, your mom was in law enforcement for many years. Mm-hmm. And you were raised up as, I don't know what you call it, a cop's kid, or what is that? What would you call yourself?
I don't know.
You weren't a latchkey kid. You were a handcuff key kid?
No, I don't think there was a phrase for what I was.
I'm betting it was a good kid.
Yeah, if not, his mom's friends would have kicked his fanny.
Well, it's kind of funny because I was held to a bit of a higher standard having that upbringing, and I think it was just by virtue of who my mom is as a person. But it's interesting. Some of my family members, when we talk about my mom being in law enforcement, they will all tell you in their own way that cops are just a little bit different than other people. I think that they have something, they possess something, whether it's intuitiveness, a different way to look at things, a different perception, a way to read people. That's kind of the common general theme when they talk about people that become, law enforcement officers. I just think they have something a little bit different. And I think it gives them an edge in a lot of things in life as well, not just in their career path, but you see a lot of folks post law enforcement run businesses. They go on to other endeavors and ventures, and even writing books in some cases. So
we talk about how the firefighters, the personality that's attracted to being a firefighter, you run into burning buildings. Most everybody else runs out,
Right.
But you sit there and you wait to be called, and you're in a place. The phone rings, the bell goes off. You go out, do your job, and you come back. Between the East and the West Coast policing philosophies, the West Coast, which is basically founded by LAPD, doesn't mean that it's only done. Like San Francisco runs an East Coast philosophy, and I think Miami now runs a West Coast, if you will. But that means that their job was to go out and, almost like a shark on patrol, always be looking. If you were in New York and somebody's walking down the street with a TV and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, you say, "Hey, did anybody call about a TV?" Nope. All right. Not quite, but that's basically what would happen in a New York City environment. In LAPD, it wasn't that way. That's how you could patrol and police 1 million people with 6,000 or 7,000. With truly, I remember looking at the stats. In the San Fernando Valley, there's 1 million people. And in most of the time during the day, you were at about, at the time, maybe 150 officers.
Right. A third of what a New York police department would have.
Incredible.
Yeah.
We would have as many on our department for LA than would graduate each and every year with New York. Now I think maybe there's 8,000 or 9,000 on the department today, but back then there was 5 or 6 or 7, and you would have a department whose job it was to manage millions of people, 3-4 million in the city of LA at the time. Just in the San Fernando Valley was over 1 million. So, cut law enforcement a little bit of slack. If you want to learn more about this book, Carlos Solano, The BS Behind the Badge. I think it's a great read, and it gives you some stories to talk about with your friends and family, especially those in law enforcement. And it's a first-hand account where you can, I think, really learn about the mindset. It's not easy, especially if you go to dinner or you sit with somebody in law enforcement. Their back is never against the door. You can ask my wife.
Or me.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us, Carlos Solano.
Thank you for
Folks,
having me.
you guys will be able to get a hold of this book. Send us an email. We'll send you a link as well.
If I can add to it, there's a Facebook page and also a website to bring out those stories to help educate our public.
What's the website?
Just that, the BS Behind the Badge.
The BS Behind the
As is the
Badge.com.
Facebook. Thank you.
As well as Facebook, folks. Thanks for listening. We'll be back in just a minute. Special guest, Congressman Steve Knight, on your place for news, talk, and information. AM 1220, KHTS. Hey, welcome to the show, Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour. I'm Arif Halaby, along with, of course, Mr. Jeff Gerard, talking about your family's finances, getting out of debt, managing money, planning for your future, and putting yourself in a position, folks, to understand our political season. That's why we have Congressman Steve Knight. A lot of things happening also up in Washington. Congressman Knight, tell me a little bit about what's going on with some of the latest bills, because I want to get into some of those as well.
Well, it's very interesting right now, Arif. We're going through a lot of our appropriations bills. We're still working on our NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act, which comes through the Armed Services Committee.
What does that mean?
Yeah, that's basically how we pay our military, how we pay for the stuff for our military. If we're going to buy airplanes or submarines, or we're going to do readiness training and all of that, that all comes out of that $600+ billion budget that we pass consistently every year. Last year was the first year it's been vetoed in 54 years. We got through that and we got it authorized.
Why was it vetoed?
Oh, a couple issues with funding for overseas operations, and we worked it out. The president didn't like the way it was going, and then we kind of negotiated with him. He actually came back and agreed, and we moved that forward. But that was the 54th or 55th year that the NDAA has moved forward, so it's kind of one of those things in Washington that works. And when we're talking about the military, everybody kind of understands that we want to keep them as trained as we possibly can, give them the proper equipment, and make sure that if they are going to go out into theater, then they have the best chance of surviving. So that's something that's nonpartisan in my opinion. We're working on several bills. And like I said, the appropriations bills are moving forward, and we have 12 of those. Hopefully, we'll get through the majority of those, if not all of them, and we'll actually have a budget.
Now, we've seen a couple of things happen with the military armor over the years. In fact, we've had friends and clients whose kids were part of the military, and they would actually raise funds to send over flak jackets, bulletproof vests back, going back many years. But
Sure.
has that been resolved today? Are our military men and women who are at the front lines actually have real bulletproof vests?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do in the last, at least the 18 months I've been there, we have a new chairman, and his ultimate goal is acquisition reform and making sure that when we have something, we want to get it to the folks on the battlefield as quickly as possible. So just that. Don't mess around with the politics of the issue. Let's get them the things that they need. So yes, but outside of that, there are still several groups across the country. I work with one that we make care baskets, and we send care baskets over to them periodically. And there's hundreds, if not thousands, of those groups from local groups that send over 10 or 100 baskets or boxes to the big organizations like Red Cross. That's always needed. And a care package from home or a care package from anybody is a good thing.
Yeah.
When that shows up and you got beef jerky and fun things in there to kind of make your life a little bit, more normal for those few minutes.
There's an old bulletproof vest company that I don't know if it's still around. I know I probably still have one. It's called Point Blank.
Point Blank's still around.
And they were ones that had some big issues with some of the, I don't know if it was the material just didn't work, if it was some of the original engineering. But we've pretty much cleaned out that. Our men and women have bulletproof vests if they're in the front lines. Is that right?
Yeah, and flak, they'll have the flak jacket. So, as a police officer, when you and I came on, we had a bulletproof vest that was very stiff. It didn't move. It didn't breathe very well. Bulletproof vests today that are still level 2 bulletproof vests for our police officers on the street. Some of them you can wad up into a ball that looks just a little bit bigger than or about the same size as a softball, basketball type thing. But in battle, you still want the flak jacket, you want the bulletproof vest, and you want the flak jacket. And yes, everyone who's on the battlefield who wears can be engaged. Yes, they have those.
Okay, that's important to me.
Well, I just wanted to speak to your point there. You were talking about the military providing, or there's funds appropriated for the military to provide what's needed to do the job. But the sense of normalcy for these folks, that comes from, I think, like you said, friends and family sending things over, and we should not neglect that part of their lives. They have to have some semblance of a normalcy, like you said, in the battlefield, because they're not working. I mean, they're on duty 24/7 or working around the clock, but hey, they're not always getting shot at, right, or engaging an enemy. So there has to be some sense of normalcy there.
Well, Jeff, you're exactly right. I mean, in America, we are a very, very generous country. In fact, we are very generous to other countries. We're very generous with our time and our money and issues like that. But part of that is how generous we are to our military. And that might mean churches and nonprofits and just groups that are out there. Boy Scouts do an awful lot, and other groups that want to help the military. And so what they find out is, hey, if I send a care box over there with items from normal life, that makes a big difference, and we have that in America. So those do happen, and that does happen on a daily basis. That is a great thing. Some things are not going to be provided for the military, or provided for by the military, and normal life, even in a very chaotic situation, sometimes is a very important thing.
Mm-hmm. The last few days of trading in the stock market have seen some craziness, if you will. For those folks that still have some of their retirement in the stock market, they lost $3 trillion is the latest number. $3 trillion. Now, some of it came back today. Not very much, but some. What is Congress's role, opinion, if you will, or maybe even the Republican Party, if it has to be narrowed down to that, or your role or opinion on that Brexit? The British government leaving the euro. Now, they were never a full member of the euro, folks, so don't think it's not as if Germany left or France. That's a huge deal, because they gave up their currency and 100% of their autonomy, basically, for everything, including some domestic issues, gave it up towards the central government out of Brussels, unelected group of people that in most cases were creating a little bit more of a problem, according to the British people. So, but what about this particular time frame? Has that changed a lot of what you're looking at?
Well, it's very interesting. We will get briefings. We are in the district this week, and so we will get phone call briefings this week on what's happening, what we can do, and what we should or shouldn't do. But I don't sit on financial services. I don't sit on the committees that will have the direct implications of looking into this. But let's understand that countries make decisions. It does affect the stock market. There's no doubt about that. If there is a major change in economic policy or a major change in kind of their connection to other countries, there's going to be a dramatic change in our stock market. Now, I believe that the stock market will rebound. It will bounce quite a bit. But that is part of living in the economic world that we do. And having our money tied up into stock markets and exchanges that rely on this type of information, and some for good and some for bad. You do want the stock market to have some changes, not drastic changes like we've seen over the last few days. And I think everybody's been watching the market
It
closely.
scares a lot of folks. We just did basically a client meeting, if you will, to kind of put some minds at ease, because what we do, folks, none of your money goes into the stock market. That's why Total Financial Solutions is a little different. Our goal is to not put money in the market, so you're not going to go up and down. There's some trade-offs, if you will, but to put a lot of folks at ease, they were a bit concerned. Another question for you, Steve. We're seeing across the board that at congressional offices, the sit-in, what is silly? This is my opinion, okay? Congressman Knight's here, but it's my opinion. What a silly, juvenile, absolutely ridiculous symbolism over substance, typical approach that the left has done. When they have a chance to make a stand and to do something good, they chose symbolism over actually making a difference. Commentary done. Congressman Knight. Tell me what your thoughts are.
Well, it's your show, so I don't have an opinion.
I didn't want to tie you into my opinion if you weren't there, so I had to give you a little bit of leeway out.
Yeah, it was interesting last week. I think that, this is a dramatic time in America. And we have seen some horrific incidents in San Bernardino and in Orlando recently that have been just as bad as you can possibly think of. There should be something done at the congressional level. There should. And we actually are doing things at the congressional level. There are bills being written. There was a bill that day that went through appropriations that was killed, bipartisan. Republicans and Democrats killed that bill. It was a gun bill. There are several gun bills that are coming up, and there are several gun bills that might have an effect. But if we're going to change something, then let's change it correctly. I think the no bill, no break fiasco that we saw on the floor last week was just that. It was a publicity stunt. If you were actually saying something, no bill, no break, then why are everyone who was involved in the sit-in at home right now?
That's right.
Why didn't they just stay and have no break and just say, hey, look, we're going to push this for 9 days?
This push of this no-fly list, what a joke. There is no due process to get on the fly list.
There is no due process. The no-fly list is not, if anyone out there is advocating for that, they don't understand what the no-fly list is.
It's incredible to me. There's no due process. That means you got the 14th Amendment is violated. I can go on and on. Certainly, there's no Fifth Amendment right to even have a conversation about why am I on there. They don't tell you. How difficult is it to get off? Isn't there even one of your colleagues is on
Oh, we've had several. Ted Kennedy was on it. Tom McClintock was on it. We've found nuns on it. It is a chaotic, just kind of a publicity.
Where's it centered? Where's that no-fly list centered? Out of DOJ?
DOJ and FBI has a little part of that too. But everyone who's advocating that doesn't understand that if you're going to build a list, if you're going to have a real list, which I think that's the way we're going to, that is the conversation, then you have to have due processes. And the U.S. American citizens have to have an ability to get off the list when they have found that's not them. They're not a terrorist. They don't have this activity. And you can build that list by starting with the terrorist or terrorist connected people that are not Americans, that we know.
Right.
They have terrorist connections, and they have traveled to the United States, and so we build the list off that. But this list is an absolute joke. I love it when people are out there saying, well, just push forward the no-fly list. Okay, well then why don't we just do lists like that for everybody, that we just say,
You know
okay,
how many of those rogue agents have put their ex-wives on this list,
Uh-huh.
or their ex-wives' boyfriends, and just to mess with them because they know they're going to the Bahamas for the weekend and they're going to take their kids out.
And so what's the problem with it? We can't start with the bad guys? Or is that
But
profiling?
no, I think that's what's going to happen. Is we are going to start with a group of people that we absolutely know. These are the terrorist activity. I mean, the terrorist groups. They have connections to terrorist groups. We build the list. I am okay with building a list. I absolutely am. But you absolutely have to have due process for the list. You absolutely have to have a way that somebody can get off the list that has not been vetted, has not gone through the process. It's not them. The no-fly list is just, it was
It's become this fiasco of who knows, 500,000, 1 million people. They won't even tell you if you're on the list or how many people are on the
Right.
list. So I think I'm all for common sense. There just seems to be, you go to the murder rate, not the gun violence. What a joke, gun violence, murder rate, but the murder rate in Great Britain. The murder rate in Great Britain is greater than the United States. Why? Because of axes, knives, poison, and they hit people with their cars. There are more people being killed. So when you have a big guy with an axe and you have a little woman or a little guy, what's the equalizing force? I think the only thing is a gun.
Yeah.
I don't know the reason behind this, but Congressman Knight, I think the Republicans have to have a bit more of a spine when it comes to talking about this and speaking facts like those that I just laid out and a bunch of others.
Well,
because you guys
I
seem
agree.
to be,
I agree,
capitulating.
but we do have to do something. There is, and that's why there is movement on both sides of the aisle. I think that this was a publicity stunt last week. Didn't help anything. Didn't change anything. A couple people got some headlines. A couple offices were sat in by 6 or 7 people, and they got some headlines. But if you actually want to change something, then let's sit down and let's understand what we're going to try and do. And if we're going to build a list, let's build that list. If we're going to put some other changes on, let's work cooperatively. And I think that that's what's happening. Last week, they want to do this no bill, no break when we have to do the Zika. We have to get that done. The Zika had to get done. Right now, there's 423 women in America
Wow.
that are pregnant that have Zika. That is growing every day. We have to get this done. We did. Now the president says that that's not the way he wanted it because we built in offsets and he just wanted to pay for it. We said, no, we'd like to have offsets because,
And an offset is if we're going to spend money here, we have to cut money
That's
here.
right.
Because the pie is only so big.
because the pie is only so big and our pie is too big.
Folks, when we come back next week at this time, I want you to stay with us through the coming weeks because we're going to be talking to Congressman Steve Knight, getting some issues. You have questions, you have concerns, send them to us. We don't mind posing some tough questions. He's a relatively tough guy. Not bad. Your place for news, talk, and information. Total Financial Solutions, Safer Money Hour. Every week at this time, folks, we're here for your family's finances. Go to tfswealth.com. TFS Wealth stands for Total Financial Solutions. tfswealth.com. I'm Arif Halaby along with Jeff Gerard and special guest, Congressman Steve Knight. Thanks for joining us.